Democracy requires informed citizens, so is higher education doing its part? That question's key to our conversation with Oberlin College's 15th president. President Carmen Twilly Ambar of Oberlin College.
Good to see you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Having watched you live stream using the technology as you introduced yourself to us and we to you, that great stream that is Oberlin.
That was a great experience for me, and just a fun time to be introduced to a community and honestly to get that love and affection back.
Oh, good.
So it was wonderful. For those who were on the live stream, you couldn't see what I was seeing in the room. Yeah. But there were just moments of real affirmation and connection and a sense that we were beginning something together that was important.
And your parents.
Oh, that's great.
Your parents
Fantastic.
being there, that was... I have this profound sense of continuity that is Oberlin. I think perhaps I told you that early on, that it's those who have become ancestors,
right.
Those of us who are the alumni, those of us who are on campus as students, those who aspire to be
right.
alumni, and to have your parents with their backstory there as we made yet another move forward. You're only the 15th president, or is it the 14th?
No, 15th. I'm the 15th president.
That's very few.
Yes, it is. And I think when the chair of the board, Chris Canavan, was recounting sort of all the milestones of the world in some ways, as Oberlin has made its history, and then the opportunity to step into that history and to lead this institution was humbling and exciting. And having my parents there was just, I think that all of us have these moments where you just want your parents to be proud, and I've had the opportunity for my parents to feel that way on a number of occasions, but this was one of those ones where it just was something different. And it was, my mom had come here many times before, just doing genealogy studies and looking at the Underground Railroad and doing various things associated with that sort of history. So to come to Oberlin in this way was just special.
Her chickie was going to be the president.
That's right. And she kept saying to me all the time, this is so wild, because I think it was just kind of an otherworldly experience, but wonderful.
Oddly enough, as you say that, I remember the first day I stepped on campus as a student, having that same sense of excitement of entering into something big.
Right.
But I didn't know what it was.
Right.
Bill, did you sense that when you went to Stanford? Did you sense, I'm hearing something big, but I don't know what it is on your first day at college?
Actually, I was intimidated, and I doubt seriously that President Ambar was intimidated.
Well, I have to say that anytime you come to an institution like Oberlin, you want to be true to its history, but also help the institution do what it needs to do for its next phase. So I think that it's a feeling of excitement and energy and determination. And I think one of the things that's really been interesting, so I think I'm on my 9th day. So I've been on campus for a couple of weeks, but I think I'm in my 9th day. And one of the things that's been important to me is to go out and to sit in classes. Mm-hmm. And I've always done that at every institution that I've been a part of, but what's been really important about doing that here at Oberlin is to really sort of understand the intellectual framework and academic experience that students are having. But maybe more importantly for me is it's been restorative. So, you're in these meetings all day and you're talking about complicated, difficult issues that are important for Oberlin. And getting out in the classrooms and seeing the faculty, seeing the students, and listening to their academic discourse, being at the conservatory, I didn't realize how restorative that part was going to be for me. And so I realize now that it's not just something to do, it's something that I have to do, not just for my understanding of Oberlin, but for my own sort of nurturing of my own spirit.
That raises an interesting subject on the role of colleges and universities going forward and how technology is changing things. Lots of talk about using the internet, about using the various technologies that are available. My concern with that, and it goes to precisely what you're saying, is the lack of personal contact and the dangers. Right. And my question for you looking forward, how do you envision bringing the technology in and yet maintaining that human interaction,
Right.
the smells, the sounds, the touching that's so central to the experience.
Right. Well, I think there is a way to do both. I think there is a way for students to have both an experience that engages them in a technological way, but also connects them with faculty, staff, and students. And most institutions have found ways for students to have all types of courses that some of them are hybrid, sometimes they're online, sometimes they're in person. I will say that one of the things that is interesting about this change is where this generation of students is. And so I'm reminded of my nephew who actually just came to look at Oberlin a couple of weeks ago. But oftentimes he'll come to visit me for the holidays. And he'll be in his room and he's sitting in my house, but he's talking to his friends in Tennessee. And their sense of engagement, their sense of connection, and how they connect with their colleagues is sort of different than ours. They view this technological connection as a deep connection. And so some of what we have to do is just recognize that their way of engaging with each other is a little bit different. You couldn't tell Joshua that he wasn't talking to his friends in the room, in his mind. And so we have to find a way, I think, to help them tap into what we think is important about interpersonal engagement right there in person, and help them get that skill set, even as they say to us, there are a lot of ways for me to connect with people, and I don't have to be in the same room together. And part of what I think we have to do is to sort of accept that the landscape is changing under our feet. How can we respond to it in a way that's true to Oberlin, but also recognizes the change that is upon us?
I have taken a couple of MOOCs.
Yes, yes.
And I find that massively online, whatever,
Yeah.
MOOCs, is really very intimate in a cold kind of way.
Right.
And cold is, other than winter,
Right.
Is not something that I ever think of Oberlin. Oberlin I think of as hot.
Right. Right. Well, I think that I would, MOOCs are, I've never been a huge fan of MOOCs. I've been more of a fan of the small private online courses that there's 13 of you, you can see each other, that there are moments where the faculty member really says to you, you have to be the speaker here, you have to engage the class. I think sometimes the value in that is that you can't hide. In those large classes, you can really hide. In a small class where there are 13 or 14 of you, even in the online environment, you can't hide. I think the other thing that it can do is to encourage you to be truer to what you might say. And I think sometimes we can be in a class and be kind of in a group think and not be willing to talk outside of what we think the group is willing to hear. So I think there could be some benefits, but I also think that nothing can replace how we engage with each other on a personal level. And I think that we're going to have to figure out how to do it, because residential colleges have some real challenges that we have to face. And honestly, if you and I were probably starting a college to get today, we might not start a residential college in terms of just thinking about how the sort of financial model works. So we have to think about how we shift this model to respond to this changing landscape, but to preserve the core things that we know are important as a part of this academic experience.
I was here during the iconic years of 1964 to 68, and during that time, I won't go through the details, but we went from in loco parentis, literally. They reassured the parents that they would be our parents, to everybody having a key card.
Right.
The social rules were off. That wasn't by accident. For at least one generation of students prior to us, it wasn't just the social rules. We also changed the academic landscape. And we did that very aggressively, and we were, it was a contentious time. The 60s were less fun and perhaps more intense than people are willing
Right,
to. It wasn't
right.
all drugs, sex, and rock and roll by any means. And at Oberlin, we had a sense that we had a responsibility to be pushing the envelope, to be breaking down some of these old barriers that were the old way of doing business. And we did that. And I'm proud to say, I really am, you don't get to say that often,
Right.
that I was among those who started, for instance, the experimental college.
Yes.
Well, that was a big deal at the time, and now we're going, oh yeah, Exco.
Right.
But the experimental college was saying there is more than just the books. And
Right.
there's more, and even then, 50 years ago, it was more than just the residential experience. Get out into the community. And that folds into I find it very seductive, Oberlin's mantra of think one person can change the world,
Right.
so do we,
Right.
and so do I.
Right.
And how do we blend that individuality and that need to push boundaries with the profound need to build community?
Right. Right.
How do you do
think,
that?
I think that part of what we have to do, so one of the phrases that I've been using for the past couple of weeks now as I've been talking to students is, how do we turn our gaze outward? And so it's in, yes, our collective thinking, but then a willingness as a community to turn our gaze outward. I think you can build community and also be engaged in ways together around a collective issue that you think is important. And I've said to students about this, as I think sometimes we've tended to spend our time a little bit wanting to perfect Oberlin, which I'm not suggesting that there are not things that need to be changed here, but I want to make sure that, my joke has been, when you're in relationship with someone, you can't always be telling them all the things you don't like about them. That part of being in relationship, part of being in relationship is to sometimes say the things that you like about the person. And so part of what we have to help students do is to turn their gaze outward, to take the things that they love about Oberlin and try to apply those things in the world, and to help them see that some of the things that they want to work on and change, they can do right now. When I think about all the leaders that I really admire, their work began in college. Their work began early in their lives. They're not waiting for leadership opportunities. They're grasping it. Some of the issues that need to be worked on in the world, Oberlin students have a voice, and I want them to be out there in their community doing that. So how do you sort of stay together in that concept, but then turn your gaze outward? We can be doing more in Cleveland. We can be doing more in this community. We can be doing more in their communities that they go back to in the summer and internships. And there is a way to take the Oberlin way of thinking about the world and apply it to the world's challenges. And that's what I hope I can encourage students to do, in a way that takes what the Oberlin way of being in the world out into it, not just after they graduate, but while they're here on campus.
Bill, you usually say, what about the metrics for all of these
Right.
things? Would you please expand on that?
Well, the metrics is part of it. America now has more college graduates than it's ever had before. It is also in the middle of a political crisis, what I view as a political crisis. And it seems that one of the core reasons that we privilege universities and colleges is because they have an important role in the community. We look to them for ideas, for innovative thinking as the resource, the inventory of our intellectual and cultural tradition, as well as to keep that tradition alive, to create in that context. And we seem now to be in a period of anti-intellectualism, of a sense that if you go to college, you're an elitist, or if you, worse yet, if you use what you should have learned in college, it makes you an elitist. Which goes to the core role, I think, of what institutions of higher learning should be doing. Oberlin has a long history of innovation. And you have both, it seems, a wonderful opportunity and a horrific challenge to move into, to help Oberlin move into a place. And I guess my question, buried in here someplace, is where should these institutions be going? Both Oberlin specifically, but more generally, higher education.
So I think we have to accept that that there is a narrative out there around higher education that questions the cost versus the sort of outcomes, that wonders whether we have become so focused on ourselves that we're not connected to the challenges and problems of the world, that we're not accessible to anyone but folks who have a significant income. And that we're not willing to be diverse in the types of views that we have on our campuses. So we have a narrative out there that I think, instead of burying our heads in the sand and saying, well, they just got it wrong, I think we have to be more aggressive in responding to that narrative. From my perspective, one of the ways we can do that is to talk about how our curriculum can be more relevant. And it is to demonstrate to parents and families that there is a practical application of the liberal arts. There is a way to think about this work that can shift and shape the world's problems, challenges, and that we have a role to play and help define what those problems look like and how they get solved. I'm not sure we're doing as good a job of that as helping families see that and helping folks who kind of have this criticism of higher ed that that's our place and role. So some of the work we have to do here, which is to talk about our outcomes, what happens with students, what work they go and do. So I was just talking to one of our academic departments. I've been trying to go around to all the academic departments. And I said to them, so, tell me what your best students go off and do. And the strongest departments can rattle those off. Here's where they are, here's the work they're doing, here's how they're reshaping their community. So we have to do a better job of that. If we don't, then we will continue to be branded as clustered, almost sequestered in a way that doesn't seem like it impacts any of the challenges that people are facing in their lives. We have to become, one of the phrases that my grandmother used to use about her church, if your church disappeared in your community, if no one missed it, you weren't really doing your
You
job,
weren't a church.
Right? You weren't really a church, right? What were you doing? So the question in our communities is, if the college was gone, would anybody miss it, right? And if you're so sequestered and so secluded that no one will really miss you, then you're not being what you should be in the community and in the world. And I think for Oberlin, we have to stake our claim to that work in a deeper and stronger way and demonstrate more clearly that there is an opportunity for students who choose us to go and reshape the world the way they want.
That goes into it seems a central question. You mentioned the role of the church in the community, and would you miss it if it's gone? There is that institution that is the church, as an example, that is accessible to people who for whom that is a core part of their culture. The college experience, the university experience, does not have that kind of institution that runs longitudinally. It has it in 4 and 6 year stretches for people, and then they go on to someplace else. But there is no institutional base for the intellectual and cultural tradition and reality that is higher education. And that seems like a serious gap, and something that if it were filled, and you would think that the colleges and universities would have a role in that, we would live in a happier world.
Right. I will say that I think that's true, that we don't have the sort of longevity. But I will say this. Despite that sort of break where you spend 4 years here, you go to graduate school, you spend a couple of years here, and then you go off to your next role, that when I ask people about their college experience, Oberlin or whatever college that they go to, they can be 10 years out, 20 years out, 50 years out. They will still talk about those 4 years as some of the most transformative years of their lives. And I always remind students of that, particularly at orientation, because I want them to know that this experience that you are getting ready to embark on, no matter what happens in your life after this, will still be some of the 4 years that you count as the most transformative of your life.
And you're at an age where transformation is your job.
Exactly. And so while we do have this distance, something still links up to people when they're 25 years out that says, my college years shaped me and moved me. And so I think what we have to do is try to find a way to continue to tap into that connection, even though you may be off doing whatever it is you're doing in the world. People will still point back to, because I learned this, this is why I'm in this career, because I'm doing this at college, this is why this happened. So people are able to make the thread. We just have to make sure that bond is strong enough that they are connecting with the institution in ways throughout their career, because from a nostalgic standpoint and from a sense of self, they still point to their college years. And I'm sure that if I went to all of the folks who are celebrating their 50th year here at Oberlin for reunion, that they will all talk about this experience as some of the most transformative and impactful on their career, despite all the things that may have happened in their life since their time here.
I'm listening to this with my government major. They don't call it government anymore.
Right. Politics.
It's now politics. But I was a government major, and I was very happy with that title. In addition to which, John D. Lewis said, we are not a science.
Right.
We are not going to be political science. We're going to look at government, and it's important. And as I was thinking my way toward this conversation, this bold experience and experiment that is America, that we are the sovereign people, that people really can govern themselves. We have no gods in our Constitution. We have no monarch. We have no the aristocracy. That's a radical notion.
Right.
And we had some work to do to fulfill the great promises. But the fundamental idea that people can govern themselves, everybody kind of gets, and the world admires it, and they forget that at least John Adams in the Massachusetts Constitution, before there was a United States, said, and it must be grounded in education, that they have to be an educated people
Right.
if they are to govern themselves. And a lot of the, as Bill says, the anti-intellectualism at the moment, there is this poison that says we don't want education.
Right.
We want the orthodoxies.
Right.
And I think that some of the dis-ease, if you will, toward higher education is it is orthodox, it has orthodoxies,
Right.
in a time when orthodoxies really are the problem,
Right.
which gives us lots of room to grow, but to remember that education is at the foundation of being a self-governing people.
Right.
How do we, back to what Bill was saying earlier, how do we reinvigorate that idea?
You know, I think it's challenging because I do think that there is this kind of, I believe it's a cyclical thing, that it's not a permanent state.
I want to believe that too.
Yes. I'm hopeful that it's
Yes.
not permanent. That people think that their world is better when they don't have knowledge, when they just have sort of rhetoric. But here's what I think is true. That I think there is a cadre of folks who feel left behind, who feel that there's not a place for them in the new world order, so to speak. And one of the things that I think we have to demonstrate is all the stories. So my personal story, my family's personal story is an example of that. That it's only through education that you have opportunity, right? That it really is about that opportunity to go get a college degree that can transform not only your life, but your children's lives.
And the community in which you live.
And the community in which you live. And that if you don't want to be left behind, that one of the ways for that to not happen for you and your family, your children, is the opportunity to go to college. And we just have to deliver that message in a way that shows that transformation. Because I think there's a perception out there that college is only for the elites, that it's not a transformative experience, that people who come to college have already had success. They've already had opportunity. But the truth of the matter is that's not really true. One of the beautiful things about this country, despite Oberlin's selective sort of status, that there are a variety of options for college, right? There's community college, there's technical schools, there's places like Oberlin, there's regional institutions. This is as democratic a college option as we are a country. And that's what's so beautiful about it. We're not institutions where you're pegged and someone decides when you're in third grade that's kind of.
And that's reality.
And that's reality. And so what we have to sort of demonstrate is that there is a part of the system that allows for everyone to break through. It's not that it's perfect. It's not that they're not barriers. They're not things that we need to solve sort of institutionally and as a country. But by and large, you have a shot if you can find the right way forward. And one of the things that I'm trying to do in my role as president of Oberlin is to tell that story. Some of it's about the Oberlin story and its history, but some of it's about the story of America, and to impress upon people that there are opportunities. And so we have to help people see that they can take advantage of it.
Paula raised the subject of metrics. When Marvin took over as president a long time ago, it coincided with our friend Robert Franklin, who became the president of Morehouse College simultaneously.
Okay.
The Reverend Dr.
Okay.
Robert Franklin.
And we invited them, and they graciously joined us at the for lunch at the High Museum in Atlanta. And one of the things I wanted to say to them and said to them was, basically it was a plea. College presidents, I think for a lot of people, particularly boards of trustees, are fundraisers. And
become an important part of what we do.
absolutely, and it's essential. My concern and what I expressed to them was that our entire social environment has become focused on economics and money. And that has become a central metric. Higher education is regularly sold as increasing your lifetime earning capacity, which is a good thing. And there's everything else. There is the ability to inhabit a changing world with the resources necessary to cope with it, with the resources necessary to improve the community of which we're all part of changing the government when the government needs to be changed. And I'm still looking for that metric, something that goes beyond just the pure economics of it.
Right.
And
it's almost though. I mean, the challenge is it's almost like measuring quality of life. Right?
Exactly.
So, and so it's a pretty elusive effort to sort of measure quality of life. But I do think that there are some research out there about people's college experience and whether you're more philanthropic because of going to college, whether you have stronger and better relationships. I mean, I think there's some things we can do that kind of measure it, for lack of a better term. But I think that part of what we have to do, particularly for folks who are thinking about college because they are in this sort of upward mobile, striving part of their family, right? They're first in their family to go to college. They may come from economic disadvantage. And some of the real impetus for being at college is really about changing their economic situation and trying to help those families and that student see that there's this other piece of kind of sort of intellectual depth and breadth that, as you say, prepares you for all of life's challenges and victories, right? That trying to give them that sense of what other part of this academic experience and this experience in college is sort of elusive. But I do think we have to try to talk to students about it because I do think that's one of the appeals of being at a college like Oberlin. Yes, upward mobility is important, but also these other pieces that add to their lives. And it's hard to describe. It's like it's the phrase, youth is wasted on the young, right? It's hard to describe to a student who's there to say, yeah, but I really want to get out of my economic situation. And you're trying to say, but there's all these other beautiful things about it. But all we can do is continue to talk about it and affirm it for them.
I have for a long time thought that one of the core benefits of a college education, of higher education, any education, but the further you go, is to have a base to continue to learn. And richly, and it goes to the central importance of a liberal arts education rather than just a specific professional education, because you can cope with a broader and changing world. Somewhere recently I saw an article, and I can't even remember who did the research. It's the people who are most involved and most engaged in their community, it's not the learning that continues, it's the curiosity. And that seems to me to be an interesting twist on the idea that somehow by experiencing an institution like Oberlin, that you get a curiosity implant or a boost in your curiosity gene.
Your curiosity quotient.
Which gets us back to the metrics.
Right. So it's interesting. One of the ways I describe my own academic experience, just because I think for this generation of students, they are interested in sort of solving big problems, right? That's kind of, they want to sort of work on the big issues. And I've always described my academic experience as different furniture of the mind with which to analyze problems. And that each of these academic experiences that I've had is different furniture. And so when I walk into whatever this situation may be, it may be a big challenge, it may be a social setting, I have that furniture. And the more diverse that furniture is, the more often I utilize it, the better I am able to work on the big issues of the day. And I say that to students a lot because I want them to understand why the pursuit of this academic experience is valuable over a lifetime, right? That it's not just about learning this this equation for this particular exam, while it may be important for that grade, you're trying to build up all of this furniture in this house because you're going to have to go out and use it, and you want to have diverse pieces of furniture that you can use. It's a different way of saying curiosity quotient, but that's how I think about my own academic experience.
I'm a kid literally from the end of the road. And while education was a very highly valued, it was not this kind of education.
Right.
It was. And it has been interesting to me to watch the changing attitudes toward education, but I was particularly interested in your own experience, of which I'm delighted to hear you speak, that how does one bring all those pieces of furniture into the daily moment? How
Right.
does it affect your decision making?
Right.
How does it decide your very important choice of your partner, spouse,
Right.
those with whom you will travel through some parts,
Okay.
at least, of your, or your friends even.
Yes. Yeah.
And your friends certainly do influence. One of the things that I found really impressive about my time here, and I hope other places it's true, was that nobody knew that I was the kid from the end of the road.
Right.
Nobody knew the economic situation in which I was.
Right.
They knew I was working a couple of jobs,
Right.
but they didn't know, maybe
Yeah.
she's just busy. I
Right.
don't know. The democratizing,
Right.
the equalizing. And I lived for 35 years in the American South,
Right.
so I have a sense of the needs for both, well, for all of the demographic things that need to be worked on.
Right.
That the democratic process is still not only vital but imperative,
Right.
if you will, if we're moving into a radical changing world.
Right.
And if anything, in the course of my time away from here, the changes in the world, and my colleagues who are putting together a big reunion,
Yeah.
everybody says nothing's the same.
Yeah.
There are some similarities, but everything about, and they specifically, my discipline, I learned all that stuff in college, but none of it applies anymore.
Right. Right.
And to give people the tools, whether you're from the end of the road or you're the Upper East Side,
Right.
or you're from what is so unkindly called the flyover district,
Right. Right.
that everybody really does bring, as I used to say with my theologically inclined friends, the least of these
Right.
have as much to bring to the table as those who have grown up with privilege. And I'm thinking this as I say it, I think that the very nature of the liberal arts encourages that kind of levelizing. And
Right.
I say that in the most complimentary way. Do we just have to live it to have had the foreign affairs degree, to have been a provost, to been it, and you've risen to positions in very distinguished organizations, and you still got your feet in the mud.
Right. Right.
Is it the living that? Is it by example? Is it by what classes you take? How do you bring all of this to your daily decision making? And keep in mind that kindness and compassion
Right.
are what must guide us.
I do think that some of it's in the living. So, it's like any journey, the sometimes the time you enjoy it most is in the reflection, right? When you go on a big trip to wherever you go to, you have a great time while you're there, but boy, you really have a great time when you're back telling people about it. And so some of it, I think, is in the living of it. I also think that some of it's in the interactions that you're having along the way as your mind is being shaped and moved and changed by the very people for whom you're doing this work, right? And I try to pay attention to that because you want to make sure that you are not just heading in a direction, that you have a direction that you want to head in, but you have people along the way who are engaging. Yeah, and it will change. And the beautiful thing about plans is that they can change. So I think that part of it's in the living of it. I will say that, now I'm in what year am I in higher ed? Maybe my 19th year, 20th year. Watching the shift in institutions of higher education has been dramatic. We are experiencing what I've described to people, because I think people can recognize it more, sort of what healthcare has gone through in the last 20 years, this sort of upheaval in an industry, if you want to call us that. So one of the things I think we have to do is to recognize that as we try to apply our thinking, we are applying it to a landscape that is shifting under our feet. And so that is requiring us to be just more nimble, more open, more willing to think about how we do our work in a way that may not seem totally like we want to do it, but be willing to think about it in a different way, because this shift is dramatic, and I don't think we're all going to survive it. So being thoughtful and willing to be open about what the possibilities are, even as we try to stay true to what we know is right, will be the work of Oberlin and will be the work of a lot of small private liberal arts colleges. So I've been saying to our faculty a lot over the past few weeks that one of the mysteries of life is, how do you stay true to yourself but be prepared for change? And it will be the work of Oberlin and the work of higher education over the next 10 to 15 years of how we do that.
What you say is certainly applicable or applicable,
Yeah.
depending on what country you're in,
Yeah.
to higher education. But what I'm hearing you say is it's equal applicable to the world at large,
Yes.
where everything, we truly are in an epoch
Right.
changing moment.
Yes.
So yes, for higher education, but you can't, the planet is changing.
Right.
Everything is changing.
Right.
And one of the
Rapidly changing.
Yeah.
Right. It's the change. We've experienced change before. It's the rapidity of the change
Yeah.
that I think is so daunting. So I always remind people, just technologically, because I think it's always interesting as we talk about what the liberal arts does and how you have to be prepared for diversity of perspectives and careers. Because the triplets, my husband and I have triplets. They're 10 years old, and I remember when they were first born, and my brother couldn't be there, so he called me up and said, "I want to get a picture of the triplets." And I said, "Oh, what do you want me to do?" And he said, "Just take a picture of it and send it to me." And I said, "Well, I don't know how to do that." And he said, "Well, just find somebody who's under 20 and they'll show you how to do it." It was just 10 years ago that we got iPhones and could send. That's the type of thing we do now without even thinking, right? Industries get created, right? Whole worlds are reshaped in short periods of time. So we have to be prepared for that change. So it's the Wayne Gretzky quote, right? Skate to where the puck is going to be, right? And that's how he described his greatness when people ask him about it. That's part of what we have to do. How can we sort of be ahead of it? The phrase I've been using, not best practice, next practice. That's where we have to be.
Very nice. Very nice.
We talked some time ago, probably 2 decades ago, to Mary Catherine Bateson, and Paula said something about the living in a time of great change, and she said, yes, and perhaps more significantly, we live in a time of great choice. And it's not just the change, it is that we have so many options. And again, to the importance of education, making those choices, informed choices, it seems to be central to the whole endeavor.
No, I agree that we are trying to help students understand the diversity of choices that they have, but also the type of intellectual breadth and depth they have to have so they can make those choices in a way that are right for them in their future, and trying to help them see that. Even as they, are struggling through, what it means to be 20 and away from home and all of those other things that are a part of, I remind people sometimes as we sort of get frustrated about various things, I say, well, they're 18, right? just to remind everybody, they're 18, right? And so they're having some developmental work that they're having to do. And we need to remind ourselves of that sometimes, because I think sometimes we are holding them up to a standard that we wouldn't have held ourselves up to at 18.
Or that the college once upon a time treated us as if we were 4.
Right.
One of the things I've wondered about, and I'm glad you brought up the triplets, because I was going to have to if you didn't.
No, that's fine. The triplets are fair game.
The psyche must change when suddenly you have 3 small people in your life. Yes. In somewhat similar ways to how the psyche must change if you have the incoming. I actually saw a whole gaggle of admissions people going.
Bringing some. Oh, that's interesting.
And I thought, ooh, hello.
Yeah.
Ooh, I've seen baby turkey.
Yeah.
Ooh. Bill and I have chosen not to have children. There are a lot of people in the world, as have a lot of other people, and some people had 4 or 5 or 6, and
Right.
some had 3 at a time.
Right.
Having a commitment to the future seems to have something to do with having either your own or honorary children and grandchildren. That seems a no-brainer to me, and yet what got me re-engaged with Oberlin College was the early and strong commitment to environmental issues, in some part because it's just inconceivable to me that we're not thinking about the next generation much. I mean, there are people who don't seem to understand that part of the radical change in which we're living is whether or not there will be life on Earth.
Right.
How can we get people, this is not the human condition. I know we did not evolve for the long term. We evolved to survive to the next generation. But that is one Darwinian change we've got to push through to have a real commitment to the future. Now, that sounds trite, but golly, Moses.
Right.
Those of us who are committed to the young people who are in college or whatever to be part of a stream, how do we shift the mindset from instant gratification, which is what all of our economy sells, to a sense of compassion and loving kindness for all living beings into an unknown future? How do we do that?
I'm not sure I know how, but I will say that sometimes connecting people to what people have done before that they've benefited from is a way to say that you have been prepared, and so you owe, right? So I say all the time to students that, we used to have at my prior institution this sort of what we call tuition day. And tuition day was the day that essentially said, all the money that you paid in tuition has run out, and everything else from this day forward has been, is supported by people who have been philanthropic. And was a way of demonstrating that even if you're not here on scholarship, that you are still benefiting from the gifts of other people. And part of helping people recognize their commitment to the next generation is to help people see that, this notion that we all kind of pulled ourselves up our own bootstraps and just showed up here, Nobody did that. All of us are standing on shoulders, responding to someone else's gifts or support, and trying to connect people to what someone's done for you and say, and therefore you owe.
And that's as true in the sciences,
Right.
as in manufacturing,
in every
as in being a
business.
farmer.
Absolutely. And so this notion that people have that I did it on my own, that that I'm a self-made whatever, it's such a fallacy. And so trying to demonstrate all along for every person that you are here because someone else did, I think makes most of us say, and therefore I want to make sure that the next person can benefit because of what I've done.
I also watched the live stream, though I didn't watch it live. I won't refer to it as a dead stream because that would be awkward.
Delayed stream.
There we go.
Delayed stream.
stream.
Thank you. I am educated now. One of the things that struck me, it just jumped out at me, is your reference to social justice and equity, and a list of other things. But those two, which goes to, that just covers the spectrum. It goes from the individual to the world. How does that get instantiated in your day-to-day work?
Right. So in a variety of ways. So, this is a campus that is deeply committed to a variety of issues. So, when political issues happen across the globe, this is an engaged community. And so in some ways, social justice issues that are sort of world impacting sort of fall on my desk all the time. But honestly, it happens in the small ways too, around students' personal needs. When they have something happen in their family, they need more financial aid. When they are struggling with sort of familial issues that may be national in scope, but are affecting them personally. And then it happens because we're thinking about new academic programs, a way to expand particular areas where the mission of Oberlin needs to be reflected in that work. So I was just talking to someone the other day about what stronger role we can have in Cleveland. So one of the challenges for Oberlin is that we have the location we have. There may be some students that may not choose Oberlin because it's not necessarily nearer to an urban environment around the issues that they want to work on. And yet, when I think about Oberlin and I think about our distance from Cleveland, it's really not that far. I'm not sure why we've made it be, 5 hours away. It's 35 minutes away. And so what can we do to demonstrate that there really is an opportunity to apply your learning right in a city that wants our support? That's about social justice and equity, right? That's about thinking about the big issues that you want. You want to work on healthcare policy? There's ways to do that in Cleveland. You want to work on issues of poverty, education? Tell me what you want to work on, because there are places to do that right in our backyard. And that's a way of doing two things for us: helping connect us to the community, helping people understand that we're not really off. This is rural, yes, but boy, we get suburban pretty quickly right into Cleveland and into urban. So let's help students see that there's a way to take our social justice mission and apply it now. And I, for one, believe that that is what is truly dynamic about a liberal arts college experience that layers on top of it experiential learning, internships, that sort of tries to say, and let's go apply it. And one of the things that's been shifting in higher ed to our benefit is this notion that we need to flip the classroom, right? So the classroom is no longer just a faculty member sort of standing and lecturing, right? This is a world in which, honestly, the lecture can happen online, right? They're on YouTube, they're listening and all that stuff. Anyway, they're doing that there. When we get to the classroom, now we're going to apply this learning that we've been engaged in. That ability to learn and labor together on an issue that we think is important is the social justice mission at work. It is what makes the work we do dynamic. So I feel like that I do it in almost every moment here as we're thinking about all of these broad issues. One of the things I love about being a college president is that you literally can be working on anything at any given moment. Colleges, particularly residential colleges like Oberlin, are mini cities. They really are. And I guess the president's sort of the mayor sometimes. And you can go from, study abroad to how do we help our students see the world, to the conservatory. And I was in this choral, they were singing in Russian, right? To the HVAC system. And, we really need to make sure that that's what's beautiful about these jobs, because it allows you to apply all of your thinking to these really complex problems. And at the end of the day, as I say at senior staff meeting, after every senior staff meeting, let's go out and transform students' lives, because that's why we're here.
Thinking about the current political challenges, I have come to think of justice as indivisible.
That's interesting.
It's not just social justice or environmental justice or economic justice. Those are manifestations of it. But ultimately, the core is to work mightily to create a just society. And it's not a destination, it's a process.
Right. I completely agree with that. I think one of the things that, as you all know, drew me to Oberlin is the centrality of that mission. And as I said in the live stream, that it's in Oberlin's DNA and it's in my DNA. And that coreness of that vision for itself is an important part of what I think Oberlin's about, and one of the things that I want to make sure we try to preserve in this world of real change. And I do think that students come to Oberlin with that piece of themselves, believing that they can do this work here. And what we have to do is to demonstrate more clearly how that happens in their academic experience, how they can translate it into that relevance that they're looking for, and then be clear to families that this is the place to do that. And if we can do that more and more effectively, then we can continue to be what I call Oberlin, a bellwether institution, right? As Oberlin goes, so goes higher education.
One of the things that I'm sure must be a challenge is you will have lots of people who want to toot their own horn about the thing that they care about. Well,
Right.
what I care about, I think that I'm avid. Sometimes Bill says I'm rabid as an environmentalist. I was so excited to see Oberlin take real, profound leadership around environmental issues because it's, as he says, of justice.
Right.
It's everything.
Right.
And I mean, you can talk about the dorm environment, you can
Right.
talk about your personal environment, your nutrition and your health. And I had this fear that we would sort of treat that as a fad.
Right.
And I think you are allaying my fear that there is a big thing that is important at a place like Oberlin. You don't forget that the environmental issues are central. You also don't forget that someone who's struggling with their sexual identity or is very clear about their
Right.
sexual identity or orientation or whatever today's correct
Right. Whatever today's phrase is.
Yes. How does one balance the importance of people who are passionate about
Right.
as I am about the environment, or passionate about getting into law school?
Right. No, I think it's one of the challenges of my presidency, right? And I think any college presidency, but certainly here at Oberlin, because I think there are a lot of passions and we are committed to a lot of things. And as I've said, one of the challenges in this constrained economic environment is that we can do anything, but we can't do everything, right? So that's the challenge. But I do think that we can find ways to take those areas that are important to us and to do our good work, maybe not as broad as deeply as we've wanted to do, but do good work in the ways that we can. And I think that will be the challenge for us here at Oberlin. How do we balance all of those pieces? And some of what we think we're going to have to do is to look at, one of the jokes they make about college campuses is that there's never a sunset on a college campus. It's only sunrises because we never get rid of anything, right? We continue to do stuff. Nothing ever
Back to
sunset.
those orthodoxies.
Right, so we just sun rising, never sunsets. So I do think, to be really straightforward, I do think we're going to have to stop doing some things. But that doesn't mean that we have to give up our value system in doing it. It just may mean that we have to decide that we can't do as much of this, or as I say all the time when people ask me about balance in my life, well, it's not balance. It's imbalance. And sometimes it's the time to do this, right? And we do that good work for this period of time, and then it's time to shift. And so we may have to change the balance. We may have to change not the commitment, but the focus over a period of time until we get to a certain place. It doesn't mean we're letting go of those values. It means we're thinking about what we can do well at the time until we get to the next place. And as long as we kind of are clear about that, so oftentimes I will say to faculty and staff, we're not saying that's not important. We're saying we can't do that now. And that's a different discussion than saying we don't think it's important. And as long as people know that that's true, that there is going to be a time and space to get to that work, they're happy to have an organized process towards growth, right?
One of the things that I'm thinking about at this moment, and as I listen to you, I'm going to think a lot more about, is the role of the after on-campus experience, the alumni, because everything you have said, the more you draw on those of us who are Oberlin, it's not just those 4 campus or 5 or 6 or whatever it takes you to get out,
right?
That this larger community is, not only do we owe it to Oberlin, but we too will be refreshed, as you say about going into a classroom, to be involved in these things. And for the first probably 30 years that I was off campus, out, Oberlin was always kind of a grounding place, but I never felt welcome to be a party to.
Right,
And
something you always
changed.
knew was there, but...
And I was glad for that, because I often felt,
Right.
But to really re-engage those of us who are alumni and alumni and alumni.
Yes, you got them all right, though.
Get my
Very
Latin
good.
right here.
Yeah, you did a very good job. Yeah.
To keep us engaged, to demand something of us, that it isn't just send money. We're not milch cows.
Right.
That, that's important. And what do we have to bring? Are we really welcome in here? Are we just those old people who, even if they're 24, those old people who are coming back to get in our way on campus? That this is a big thing. I am reluctant to say family because there are lots of dysfunctional families in this world. This continuity.
Right.
And I really include these old white men and women on the wall in that continuity. I waved at whoever was in the cemetery when I was out walking yesterday. that we all still have a real role
Right.
in this place. And for a long time, I did not feel that.
Yeah, I think we have to do, I don't think all institutions have to do it. It's not a failing of Oberlin. It's just, how do you keep connection? How do you keep that line of communication going? We certainly are trying to do more work around mentoring programs and sort of connecting alumni to current students. I think we can do some work there. You know, so this is my phrase about how I hope people will think about their connection. So wonderful institution is Oberlin. But the truth of the matter is that a faculty will come and go here. Our presidents will come and go here. The only truly constant are alumni. You are the constant part of this college. And so it is your diligence and commitment and connection that sustains it. If you don't believe in it, value it, invest in it, then no one will. And you are the true stewards, ultimately, of this institution, because there will be a time when my tenure is up. There will be a time when a faculty member moves on, and you are the constant. And so the work that you do to keep your connection strong, to invest in the institution, to connect with students, is the stewardship that will be important. Here's what is important about stewardship for me, because we have some challenging things that we have to do here at Oberlin. Because of the changing landscape and other things, that here's what we have to be willing to do. And what I would say to alumni, that whatever your passion is, you won't always agree with what we do here. And I hope that everyone's not looking for universal agreement. But what I do want you to do is to find the one thing you can agree with us on and do your work there. And if you will do that, then we will find the success that we have to have in order to ensure that we're here for years and years to come. Why is this institution worth it? For many reasons, right? You all know these reasons. But here's why I know it's worth it. Because Oberlin's commitment to social justice has never been more relevant than it is today. And when I look at the state of the world today, particularly in this country, Carmen, Ambar's Fear of the World, that the type of work that Oberlin students will go out and do will be the very work that will move this country in the right direction. And so the reason why we have to be good stewards and be willing to put our institutional hat on, that's been my phrase, not this, what's best for the institution, because we want to ensure that Oberlin is here for the 250th year, for the 400th year, for the 600th year, because this country needs it. That's the reason.
And we need it.
And we need it. And we need it.
You have been gracious.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
I am heartened. It is a challenge. It's a thrill. It's scary. It's life.
Yes, it's all those things. So my phrase is challenging in all the right ways, right?
Right.
Challenging in all the right ways.
And good luck with those triplets.
Well, you know, I will say this last thing about the triplets, that I think the triplets are challenging. They take a lot of work, but I think that having triplets forces me to do what I think we all have to do, which is when I walk in at night, when you have triplets, they demand your attention. You cannot be half on your phone, partly on your computer. 3 children, same age, demand your attention. And so
That sounds rather like a college campus.
That's right. And so in some ways, I do what I think we all should do, which is to take that moment and to give them the attention that they need and to engage in the work that is important to them. And then after we do that for them, then we can go back to Oberlin. And so it kind of forces a certain balance that's probably appropriate, right? That I wouldn't have, I think, if I could sort of pretend to kind of be doing 2 things at once. And so I'm glad that, I'm sort of defined as the president that has triplets sort of across the country. That's
is that right?
That's kind of how people know me. But in some ways they've been a blessing because children are a blessing. But the fact that it's been 3 of them has been a blessing because it's made me do what I think we all should do, which is to ensure that we take some time to sort of devote our lives to the other people who are connected to us, even as we care about our work in these wonderful ways.
And there is the essential pick the right partner, spouse.
Oh, we could do a whole segment on that. So I say to the students sometimes when we talk about choices of significant others, and I say, sometimes we spend more time planning our vacations than we do talking about what that's going to be. Because, a partner who wants to go through this world with you and is agreeing to certain things is an important part of our ability to live well, I think, and to have quality in our lives.
Learning and labor has really helped guide my life, and you have turned the volume back up on learning and labor. All the best luck.
Thank you so much.
Call on all of us as
I
alums.
will do what I can to do that.
And we look forward to creating a future with you.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
President Ambar's inquiring mind, experience, and good humor are encouraging. We wish her well generating bold responses to our world's challenges.